I'll do an intro or something later. So we just kind of cut into
They're
it.
the worst, right?
Yeah.
I never do them anymore. And then I always forget to edit one in later. I'm just like, just put the intro video in, and
well, it's kind of
people
like,
don't care.
I feel like even like with Joe Rogan, it's not like he does one. It's just like that little sound bite, and then they're just already talking.
Like Jamie made that edit where like his logo twirls, and then they're like, "Are we on? Okay, cool."
Exactly.
You were talking about aliens.
You're right. Yeah, ancient civilizations and the best stuff.
Yep.
But so, I mean, how did you even get started in podcasting, and how long have you been doing it for?
I think it was by accident, honestly. I think it was 2017. Me and my brother were talking neighborhood politics on the couch, and our mom just thought it was funny, and we're like, you guys should do a podcast. And I always wanted to get into sports broadcast television. Growing up, I grew up in New Jersey, diehard New York Yankee fan, went to games all the time, grew up, Michael Kay, the voice of the Yankees, has his own radio show on ESPN as well. I'm like, that's what I want to do for a living. You know, like, when I saw, I'm like, he gets paid to call baseball games and analyze games. Like, I do that on the couch all day, every day for fun anyways. So getting like an opportunity in that was always the dream. When I went to school, ESPN picked up our school, Grand Canyon University's athletics, to do broadcasting. And because nobody knows what Grand Canyon University is, or at least at the time, compared to like ASU where they had like Walter Cronkite and they had like 500 aspiring broadcasters, we had like 3 aspiring broadcasters. So we got all the reps. I called over 500 games in 4 years for baseball, basketball, volleyball, soccer, you name it, and got to do that. And then just parlayed the podcast with that because I'm like, podcasts, like I've always wanted to have my own show. I always wanted to interview my heroes. Why not start just like talking BS with my brother on camera? And he's a musician, so we already had like all the microphones and the setup. So he just like put it all together, just like literally put together this entourage of microphones. There's wires everywhere, cords. Like you guys make it look so clean in here. Ours were just like, you see like they're all knotted up and like half-ass in it the entire time. But we hit record, we saw the red light, we were looking at each other, and we're like, oh shit, this is hard. We can't just like hit record and be entertaining. You know, it took a long time. I still have my first episodes up where it's just like, hi, I'm Jack O'Hara. Welcome to the podcast, guys. And like if you go back, I'm like, damn, like I thought I was good at the time. Yeah, I always wanted to do it. But now it's like, oh, you actually have to put in the work. You got to put in the reps, and then maybe you can become good at this.
Yeah, I think that's something that holds a lot of people back, right? They're like, I'm scared to get started. I don't really know what I'm doing. And I think it was Hermosi was talking the other day about how, like, when you start, it's the least audience that you're ever going to have. Yeah. And so, like, who cares?
It's mom and dad.
Who cares if those 6 people that watch it are judging you or whatever? Like, and that's how you get better. You have to just start. I was always afraid to start. I've done, 18 years behind the camera. I've created a lot of content with me in front of the camera, and I throw it all away because I'm like, nope, that's all trash. I'm never going to post it. 8 years ago, I shot like 12 episodes for a podcast interviewing business owners. Didn't release a single one, deleted all the files. I was like, I hate this. And now here I am. I'm like, okay, I just got to start. And I've already seen, I've been podcasting probably for not too long, probably 3 or 4 months now that we've started our own and doing it. And I've seen a lot of growth just in that time. And I don't know. Do you have any advice for people that are just scared to start?
Hermosi, by the way, Alex Hermosi, probably one of the best and most genuine influencers out there today, right? You see a lot of gurus say, like, I'm an expert on everything these days. Like, he's one that I actually look at and I'm like, he gives free value. So he's a smart guy that I've always paid attention to, and I've always kind of like admired what he's had to say. I did a podcast a while back with a guy named Brant Pinvidic, who was the creator of Biggest Loser, Bar Rescue with John Taffer. And we were talking about how at the end of the day, nobody is a bigger fan of your work than you, right? Nobody gives a shit what you're doing, especially when you're starting. Like if you're nervous to get into this and you're like, what are people going to think? It's like, no one gives a shit, man. Yeah. Like nobody truly cares about what you're doing. Everybody's got their own problems. Everybody's got their own things in life going on. Just do you, and do it the way you want to do it. Because nobody's going to be like, hey, man, I don't, we've been friends for a while and I don't really like the way you're carrying yourself. No, nobody cares. If you come out in a way where you're just being your true, authentic self, and the word authentic gets thrown around these days in the most unauthentic way, But if you could just be you, like that's going to shine through in the long run. Because nobody got into this to do 5 episodes and say, well, it's not taking off. This wasn't worth the investment. You got to put in years of work. And I know that there's some people out there that have started shows that blew up in a year. Like, it's happened, right? But the 99%, you got to grind at this like it's anything else. It's no different than a startup business if you're in tech. A lot of solar companies today. Real estate, you're not going to get your first big deal for a year or two. It's a grind. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So my biggest piece of advice is if you really want to do this, you're going to prove to everybody that you really want to do it by sticking through it, even in the beginning when you're just stuck in the mud and nothing really is happening.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that part about being authentic, and I agree with you. I hate that became such a buzzword in social media with all the gurus and all that crap, because it's like, it shouldn't be a buzzword. It should just be real, right? Like,
right.
And they always act like they're authentic, but they're still faking it. They're still not even being themselves.
It's so blurry right now, right? I remember 4 or 5 years ago having conversations with people, and I'm thinking like, because I was still 4 or 5 years ago, 19, still in college, like still figuring it out, but still grinding, like trying to do at least 2 interviews a day. And that's when like Zoom was really kicking in. So I'm like, I'm just trying to reach out to everybody, trying to make as much video content as I can. And everybody would talk about authenticity. And I'm like really inspired by a lot of these conversations. And I'm not saying anybody in particular, like I found out was like full of shit later, but like looking back at it, I'm like, yeah, everybody kind of does just put on a face, It's good for business to be the likable guy. And it's just like, in the long run, everybody finds out who everybody is at the end of the day. So you may as well just be yourself and not try to be someone that you're not. And that goes in both ways. Trying to be someone you're not, like being a guy who just wants people's money at the end of the day doing a business, or even just people just trying to like stand out and like make a name for themselves. Like I've known a lot of great guys in this industry that are really good dudes, but like on camera, they're like trying to be something that they're not. I'm like, that's going to fizzle out because you're just going to burn yourself out. Just be you. And in the long run, and again, years down the line, it'll all be worth it.
That's something we always talk about here is when we tell like our clients. A lot of our clients are newer to this, right? They're typically business owners. They want to start creating content, and they're like, oh, like, I don't know how to be so bubbly or do this or do that. Like, I can't be whatever. I'm like, you just need to be you on camera. And the reason why you want to be you on camera is because that's going to connect with other people like you, that like that vibe. I mean, it's like doing business, like, I don't want to put on a front or behave a certain way to get certain types of clients that I don't even like. I'd rather be me and get clients to come in that vibe with me, and then I'm happy. I work with them. We get along. We understand each other. And so I think it's so important that if you are going to start, you have to just be you. You don't have to try to fit some narrative that you think everyone else is trying to do. And you don't have to be super exciting. Like, you can do a really boring podcast that is going to build the right audience for what your podcast is about. Like, I'm actually going to be starting one soon about the long-term care community pharmacy world, specifically in marketing. And that's pretty boring to everyone in the world, except for the couple thousand pharmacists, marketers, right?
Right.
But that's who I'm trying to talk to.
That's all you need, though.
Yeah.
I mean, you were saying it before we came on, too. Like, if you're getting – because there's a lot of people that'll focus on numbers today, the analytics, especially on social media. Like, if you post a reel and it gets 250 views, they're like, 250 people saw it. It's like, yeah, but, like, put 250 people in a room, it's a lot of people. And all you need is, like, 1, 2, maybe 3 people to do business with you. That's a pretty good relationship to build and pretty good payday. So, like, people are so focused on, like, I need 100,000 views per video. No, you don't. Like, if you see a couple hundred people, that's a couple hundred people, And then a couple hundred people, once you stay consistent at it and post every single day, valuable content that's both passionate for you and building that genuine audience that also sees the work and the potential that you've put in. All you need is those 2-3 people out of 250 views that turn into 2,500 views, that turn into 250,000 views. And again, long-term work, right? I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. Long-term storytelling is the best form of entertainment that there is in professional wrestling, best form of entertainment that there is in cinema, right? So, like, you really have to, if you want this, you got to think like, okay, work at it for the next 5 to 10 years and see where we can get it. Don't look at the next 5 weeks and say, where can we get this? Think long term.
Yeah. Well, I think especially depending on what your goal is, right? You know, if you're trying to build a channel, build a brand, it's a lot different than a business owner coming in and leveraging it for meeting space or even just creating content to their audience and their customers. You know, like for example, we had a guy come in here, we did a live stream. There was like 6 people in the live stream, and I was giving him some business advice. It's another videographer. And as I was giving him some advice on a type of project he should do for his clients, one of his clients was watching, texted him during the live saying, I'm in, sign me up for it. You know, it was like a $2,000 project. And so like, you don't need these crazy numbers, especially as a business, to start generating revenue from your podcast. We had another client who, before she even had an episode out, and she doesn't have a giant Instagram following, she already got a sponsor to cover for 6 months of doing podcasting with us. After 2 episodes dropped, she made them about $30,000 from the links and stuff like that. But she also killed it. She like would message individual people clips and like, hey, I remember 6 months ago we were talking about this. Here's a clip that's kind of like relevant to that. And by the way, this was made possible by so-and-so.
Right.
So if you know anyone, and then, yeah, they got like 3 contracts for landscaping with 2 episodes dropped, like no subscribers yet. Like,
Yep.
It's crazy because like there's so much value there if you leverage it the right way.
Mm-hmm. Affiliate marketing, baby. It can go along with relationships or everything, to go back to like authenticity. Like if you're just who you are, like you said, you attract the people that are like you, like-minded. And how awesome is it being around a bunch of people that you just get, like you finish each other's sentences. You're just like, it's seamless hanging out with those people versus people where it's just like, it's like nails on a chalkboard, like trying to get through a meeting. And it's like, we have nothing in common. And I'm sure like you starting this place in this business, which is awesome, by the way, probably the best studio that I've been to that you could just like rent for use in Las Vegas.
Appreciate it.
This is awesome, dude. Like every single room in here is awesome. The equipment, everything. I mean, Claudio was in here at one point. Even he was saying, like, that's a guy that does interviews all the time, right? And he's like, this is a pretty cool place. And when I met Adrian Hernandez, he's like, you got to shoot there because, like, this is a really nice place. He had Soraya in here at one point as well. Yeah, just going down the list of the people that you've had in here. There's some pretty big people that have been in here. Where was I going with that? Oh, relationships, affiliate marketing. Like if you can surround yourself with people that just like believe in you and are good people and they want to win, you want to win, like the sky's the limit versus people that just like you just know you're together because it's like, oh, there's a money opportunity here. But there's a lot of people this is where I was going. There's a lot of people that start podcast / production content spaces, warehouses, studios that plummet pretty quickly because they can't get the clientele. They're looking at it like, oh, there's a big podcast wave right now and everybody wants to do a show, so we're going to get clients to do this show. Everybody's going to want to be a big star, be on TV. No, like that's not how it works, especially now. I don't know. Maybe this is just me from what I've seen, and I kind of hope it is because I've been in this for almost 9 years now. I think the podcast wave is somewhat dying down. Like the real shows, the people that are actually committed to it are starting to see through as opposed to the people that have done 5 to 7 episodes. They say the average podcast lasts around 7 episodes before they quit because they don't see the results. So I'm hoping that we can kind of like get on the other side of that to where it's like even for you guys, like you'll have consistent clients that are in this for the long haul. That way you could build, not only like build out a reputation, but it's like you're working with solid, hardworking, fun people, which is going to make work seamless for you guys.
Yeah, it's an interesting industry. Like when I got into it, I've only been in this industry for a year now. Like I was telling you, I did videos professionally for 17 years. I still do have a production company. We film for like the Wynn, Smith Center, Discovery Children's Museum in town. We have clients across the U.S. And so I was like, in my head, I was like, oh, this is going to be so easy. And I wanted to do this like 7 years ago. But I was like, you know what? I have to sell it. And I'm not a salesperson. I'm not here to like try to convince you to come do whatever I'm doing.
It's hard to not sound like one, right?
Right. And I'm not that type of person. And so I waited till I had a lot of clients being like, hey, we need this for our business because businesses are really slow to adapt things. And so like, this was good for them like 7, 8 years ago. Now they're realizing, oh, we should do one. And so that's kind of why I got into this for the first place was let's help these businesses create not necessarily shows, right? Like they're not doing what you're doing, which is building like an actual show and interviewing like people. Like they're more like, let's build a small community, create content for that
Exactly.
community, and this is a fun way we can do it. Maybe go on live, interview people, and kind of like build our relationships that way. And so I always like when it's a business client and they come in, I always try to tell them, I'm like, don't think of it as podcasting. Like just think about it as a meeting that you're setting, and we're going to document it and help you create that as content. But you're not a podcaster because podcasting is a completely different game, and that's a lot of work. Like
there's like a few different entities. Like I got into this to be like a talk show host, right? Like there's talk show hosts, there's podcasters, and then there's content creators. But all of them have podcasts, right? They're all under the same hat. Where it's like people who use podcasts because they want to get into the media space and be a talk show host, like me. And then there's podcasters who just like have a great time and just love the grind of it, you know, putting out 2-3 episodes a week for your audience, whether it's in sports, cinema, music, business, entrepreneurship, finance, whatever. And then there's people who do have, you know, production setups, you know, they can come in and use your setup, but they're not actually doing it for like, I'm dropping a 1-hour episode. No, it's like you're going to cut this up into 10 to 15 clips that are going to serve your potential clients on social media that see your stuff.
Yeah. And then, you know, you interview a lot of big names. Like you've been doing this for a while. You're getting out there. How do you do that interview process? Is it, you know, was it scary to do like your first big name? You know, do you do a lot of research first or just kind of off the cuff? Do you give them a lot of like, hey, here's the questions? How do you kind of do that interview process?
It's evolved over time, and every guest is different, as you know. The bigger the name, you really don't know what to expect. Some people are awesome. Some people are eccentric. Some people you walk away like, I never want to see that person again in my life. When I first started, I remember I had like question 1 through 10 lined up. And I didn't even care where the conversation went. I'm like, I just have my questions, right? As anybody else starting out, that's what you would probably do. It's like I wasn't even listening to my guests talking. I was just focused on like, all right, next question. And that's like when I was doing like interviews over the phone, like I'd have my list in front of me and be like, all right, yeah, man, that's cool. And then in 2010, you know, like you just go on to the next question because like you don't have any experience in it. And then you look back at those interviews 7 years later and you're like, man, I sucked. Why did he ever do an interview with me? So you learn through doing it, the repetition. It's like anything else in life. You want to put on muscle, go to the gym, learn for years on end on how to do the right things, right diet, right everything, right? Right amount of sleep, right amount of supplements. And I don't know if everybody just saw that spit just fly all over the place.
We'll slow-mo it.
Yeah, that'll be good content right there. And then after a while of doing it, you build certain relationships. I was fortunate to build a relationship early on in college with one publicist that worked for WME, represents a ton of different people. And when COVID hit, nobody had an excuse not to talk to anybody. You know, it's like if you didn't want to come on, like you weren't that valuable. And like my show was not valuable, still is not that valuable to this point, right? But like, I'm just going to reach out to these people because like the worst they can say is no. They're all at home on their couches anyways. So I was able, I think the first big guest I ever had on was Jordan Belford, who's like infamously known as the Wolf of Wall Street. Yep. Unbelievable salesman, for better or for worse. He had a webinar. It was supposed to be a seminar in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And I got to ask him a question over the webinar. I'm like, hey, I'm obviously like a big, been influenced by your work, trying to get in like the sales game at that point in some way, in some capacity, and make some more money. Could I like pick your brain for 10 to 15 minutes on my podcast or whatever? He's like, yeah, absolutely. We'll carve out some time. And he gave me like 50 minutes of an interview. And I think I asked him 2 questions. He just talked and talked and talked and talked and talked. And even looking back at that, I'm like, okay, that guy was something else. But that was the first time where I'm like heart's pounding, like nervous. I'm like, what am I going to say? How do I make it seem like I'm like a decent deal? Not a big deal, but a decent, like I know what I'm doing. And then after that, through other relationships, I was able to interview Corey Taylor, who's the lead singer of Slipknot. And that's like more up my alley. I'm baseball, pro wrestling, rock and roll. Everything else I'm like very like I have a general knowledge of, but those 3 things I could talk your ear off for days. So getting to interview him was like again, like, I'm nervous. And that was like a Zoom interview. So I'm like, all right, I'm nervous. But like, as soon as you start to talking, like you said, like if you're doing business with someone where it's like you don't really have the same brain, it's like nails on a chalkboard. But like when you both are passionate about the same stuff, you could talk for hours. And that was like the first conversation I had. I'm like, man, he's a big deal. I've listened to him my entire life. But talking to him was like talking to my brother about rock music for about an hour. And then you get the more you have interviews like that where it's just seamless and they like you and it's like, oh, that dude was awesome. I'd do an interview with him again. And then the publicist takes note and they're like, all right, here's a few more opportunities. I think it was a year or two after that I got to interview Magic Johnson for like 15 minutes. They were promoting the NBA's 75th anniversary or something like that. And I'm not a big basketball guy either, but like I know Magic Johnson, obviously. He's like the equivalent to trying to think like, because I always compare Kobe Bryant to Derek Jeter, right? So it's like not a huge basketball guy, but I'm like, okay, like the Lakers and the Yankees kind of have like a lot of parallels. I always say Kobe and Jeter like have parallel careers. Magic Johnson was right before Kobe, so it's like more like Don Mattingly, but he's way bigger than Don Mattingly. Big Hall of Fame athlete, for better or for worse. The most down-to-earth dude I've ever met in my entire life. And he's like the biggest celebrity that I've gotten the chance to interview. And it just goes to show that everybody's everybody. I go back to like, nobody gives a shit about what you're doing. It's like, go back, like Magic Johnson, 5-time NBA champion, hell of an executive for both the Lakers at one point in time and the Dodgers currently still. He's just doing his thing, you know? He's not doing it for ego. He's not doing it because, hey, look at me, you know. It's just what he was meant to do. And he shows up every day, puts a smile on his face, and actually genuinely wants to know people, ask people questions. He asked me more questions in the first 2 minutes than I ever suspected anybody would ever ask me questions, which makes you feel like at ease as an interviewer as well. But then I've interviewed a few other people that were just like, I'm like, man, that stinks that they were not that cool. I did an interview backstage at a music festival with Dave Matthews from Dave Matthews Band. This was like right before COVID, like within a month before everybody kind of like had to be locked inside for whatever. They said 2 weeks, ended up being 12 months. And we weren't allowed, I didn't get the memo, but at this festival, we weren't allowed to record audio for interviews. We had to it was like pen and paper because I was writing an article for a website. And I put my phone in his face immediately because I didn't listen, like I didn't know. And I also had other, there was a few others. There was Ben Gibbard from Death Cab for Cutie. Cool. And then, I'm blanking on his name, Weezer.
Yeah, I don't remember his name.
I'm going to get shit for that one later. That's like one of my favorite bands. But those two were like, yeah, I don't care, whatever. Dave Matthews put my phone in his face, immediately smacked it out of my hand. Phone shattered into a million pieces. Rivers Cuomo, lead singer of Weezer. But I'm like, oh my God, he just smashed my... And I just picked up my phone, asked him my questions, wrote them down, then he left. I'm like, damn. And he was a little eccentric too, and I think people could see that in his performances. My family, though, like there's like a Dave Matthews, like some of those bands, Dave Matthews, Fish, Rolling Stones, they have like their like cult-like fan base. My brother, my sister, my dad, part of that cult, man. They love Dave Matthews. So that was like a big deal for me to like meet him. They're like, how was he? I'm like, he smashed my phone into a million pieces. They're like, well, did you piss him off? That's unlike Dave. I'm like, you haven't met him. I just met him. I didn't really have a great experience. So, and I still have the phone to this day because, again, long-term storytelling. I'm going to interview Dave Matthews again one day. I don't know when it's going to be, but I'm going to show him that phone, and we're gonna have a healthy conversation about it. That's for damn sure.
I love it. What's maybe one thing that you've learned throughout this journey that you wish you would have known starting?
You're not going to monetize this right away. I think I had that expectation. I didn't even think about making money in this at all when I first started. Again, I was 17 years old. I just wanted to be a talk show host and talk to my heroes. And that's still very much the way I operate because that's the foundation. If I didn't have that foundation and I was just thinking that from a business perspective, I would have flaked and probably left and gone into the finance world at 20, you know? But I knew, like, this is going to be a grind, but I love what I do. And then, like, you got to be creative, right? Intuitive. You're talking about your client before. It's like you don't have to have a ton of followers. All you need is, like, those few clients that are like, hey, I believe in you. Let's set something up. And what, she had, like, 30 grand or whatever you said? You know, like, it's about just being yourself, but also just knowing, and I've said this twice already in the interview, but, like, nobody gives a shit, man. Just do it. If this is really what you want, try it out. And you're going to know really quickly if this is something that you actually want or not. But I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been on, I do what I love, but I'm not making any money. And I've been on the side of, I'm making good money, but this is not my purpose. And I would choose this every single time. I would choose doing what I love and grinding it out, not really knowing what the light at the end of the tunnel is going to be, versus that, because this is what's going to bring out the best in you, you know? Anybody could take a paycheck and show up and work at a desk and then go home and just be drained and get paid every 2 weeks. I don't know about you, but I don't like waiting 2 weeks to get paid. You know, like you can make money. There's different ways to make money. There's side hustles. I drove for Uber for like 2 years. You know, like there's other ways, you know, to make money because money can finance and invest into your goals, right? So if there's one thing that I could take away from when I started this is that it's not going to be easy. You got to be in this for the long haul.
Yeah, I like that. Well, like what you're saying, like you can't care what other people think.
No.
That we did a poll on our Instagram page, and you know we put like, why don't you stop, and or why haven't you started? And the number one answer was that the fear of perfection, like they're just scared of not doing well and stumbling on their words, like I do every sentence I speak. But they were just scared of like what people are gonna think and it not being perfect and this and that. And it's funny to me because like when we get people in here, I always talk to them like they're like, oh, you're going to cut out all of our mistakes. I'm like, no, because that's what humanizes you. That's why these are so successful, because people are literally a fly on the wall. Now, obviously, if there's something like we really need to take out, we shouldn't have said that or whatever, then we
absolutely
cut that stuff out all day long. But like we had a client who was coughing a lot, and it became like a thing. Like the other girls would laugh at him every time he coughed, and became part of the show. And they're like, are you going to cut out when I cough? I was like, no, that's literally part of that episode is that. And people are going to like it because you left it in there. You're showing that you're authentic. You're showing that you're normal. And then you're literally, like the audience is just a fly on the wall. Like, you know, it's like that saying, if these walls could speak, well, these walls do speak. They have cameras in them and they're recording everything. And people love that aspect of it, right? Because you get to feel like you're their friend. You get to feel like you're part of that conversation. I know, like when I watch a couple of the podcasts I watch, which is mainly skateboarding podcasts. Well, there's really just one I watch, but it's like they're sitting around the table reviewing videos or whatever and laughing, and I'm laughing with them. Like, oh, you're so funny. And it's just me in here alone, but I'm like, oh, I got this friend group and I know them, you know. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so interesting is like by just having your day-to-day conversation, you get to connect with real people in the real world through your content. I don't know. Has there been any moment, you know, I know you're still grinding, I know you're still hustling. Is there a moment where maybe you're walking out and people are like, hey, like I've seen your podcast. Like, have you been noticed? Has there been that
it's the
wow
best
moment?
feeling. Best feeling in the world when someone comes up to you and be like, dude, I've been watching your stuff. Like, we got mutual friends. Like, they say you're awesome. Like, and it's not even like, oh, we should connect and like do a podcast, you know, because like you get a lot of that. It's like, I want to come on your podcast, right? But there's actual people that'll DM you and be like, hey, man, see that you've been putting in the work. Like, it's the best when like other creators reach out to you and they're like, hey, man, we haven't met before, but I've been seeing what you've been doing. We got a couple mutual friends. I absolutely like love the content that you're putting out. Keep going, because that's the stuff that drives you. You don't need that stuff from people. If you truly love it, I personally don't think you need the admiration from other people, because like your drive to do it should be enough. But like it's always nice when someone appreciates the work that you're putting in, you know?
Yeah, it's
because it keeps you, especially because there are times in this where I've been like, why am I doing this? You know, like not making enough money, or barely making enough money to do it the year, but I'm traveling, I'm putting in all this work, all this effort. And then there's people that are just like, oh man, like I just watched your interview from like 2 years ago with this guy. Like, this is awesome. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Thanks for providing that insight.
People are actually, there's people out there that care, right?
Yeah. Well, so I don't consider myself a content creator or a podcaster, even though we've started doing this. Like I'm just some dude interviewing some people I find interesting, trying to provide value to the world of podcasting, those people who want to get into it, right? Like that's kind of what I see myself as. I'm not trying to make a name for myself in podcasting. I'm not trying to become a creator.
Yeah.
But I've been approached by people like at hockey with my son, and then they're like, hey, I've seen your podcast, man. It's cool. And I'm like, thanks. I'm not a podcaster though.
Yeah,
like, hey,
that's the worst.
They're like, oh, I didn't know you were a podcaster. I'm like, I'm not, but I do a podcast. It's a weird thing because
it looks the same.
When I know what you do, and that's not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Like that's like your passion, your drive, and your goals are way different than what mine are, and I don't want to take away from the experience or what you guys do. And I know, like, to everyone else out there, it looks like I'm trying to podcast now, but like. It is a really cool feeling. Or like we have clients, like, because we do these lives or whatever, and it's like nobody really engages or talks or comments on any of our stuff. But then they come into the studio and they're like, oh man, I was watching that live of you, and when you said this, it hit differently. And I was like, yeah, we need to start zooming in guests on our show. Let me use this for building relationships and not just content. I'm like, I've said that 15 times to your face. But they saw that one piece and it helped them. And I'm like, okay, that's why I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. Let me help those people that are watching silently and impart some knowledge that I might have or others have. And, they never comment or like or anything. But the fact that we're making a difference is cool. And it's cool to hear that because you're like, okay, maybe I'll keep doing those lives. Because I was kind of like, maybe I should stop doing these lives. Like we get like 10 people throughout the hour in here.
That's why people stop though.
Yeah.
Because they see the numbers. They're like, no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
In the most positive way possible, nobody gives a shit. But like people are watching, and they'll see, like, it'll be ingrained into their brain if you're posting consistently and doing lives and like getting yourself out there. Because like for me growing up, I always wanted to be a talk show host. I always wanted to be a broadcaster. I was the most introverted, awkward kid in the world. Like couldn't talk to people. Like would come home and be like, Jack, how was your day? Good. You want to talk about it? No. And I walk upstairs, like my parents couldn't get 2 words out of me. And then throughout this, like I said, I was very monotone at the beginning, didn't know how to hold a conversation. Now I feel like I could talk anybody's ear off and actually be genuinely curious about their lives and what they're doing because I've gone out there and have had all of these different experiences, both good, bad, and indifferent, and can actually relate to some people, like what some people are going through, whether it's in their business or personal lives, whatever. So, yeah, it's your credit right there. It's like you can help anybody because you can relate to them, and it's like at the very least, you're curious enough to get to know them and what makes them tick.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I started doing this, right, because I wanted to understand what our clients go through. And so I do get to start understanding, like, okay, yeah, nobody's seeing our stuff, or it feels like nobody's seeing it.
Yeah.
Nobody's commenting, nobody's liking. But then we get to experience these other moments, and then we can help our clients who are struggling in that beginning phase. Because, like I said, a lot of our people are like brand new at this, and so it's like, look, you might not see any results, especially in the business world. The people who buy from you never comment. Mm-hmm. Like they just don't. They're never going to like your stuff. They're never going to share it. They're never going to comment.
Here's what I think. I think rich is loud, wealthy is silent. I think the most wealthy people on planet Earth have never had an Instagram account. They've never scrolled through TikTok. They're not on Facebook. Like you said, they're not in the comments. They're not in the likes. They don't share your stuff. They don't care.
Yeah. But yeah, exactly. I mean, that makes me think about one of my clients, and yeah, he's like not on anything. I think he's on like LinkedIn, and it's like, yeah, kind of there.
Right.
But yeah, so like the people who buy from you typically won't comment, like, or share anything. They just silently watch and build that trust, and then they're like, okay, I like this. I trust this. I'm going to buy from this, especially being a business. So it's been an interesting journey for me too, like just figuring this out because it's just a whole different world for me. And it's been cool. And we've seen some cool stuff with our clients. Like we had a client who dropped one episode and they wanted to come more, but then business owners' life is crazy. Life is crazy for everyone. And they came back after like 3 months, and they're like, dude, it was so cool. We dropped the episode. Then I went to this networking event. Someone went up to me like, hey, aren't you that podcaster? And I was like, yeah, that was me. Like, so he was hyped because he saw that like one person like noticed it and saw it. And so I get really fulfilled from that. And when I started this, I didn't know I'd be fulfilled from this stuff. Like I really started this for different reasons. And now I'm like, I have such passion for the world of podcasting and content creation in this format, because I see the actual relationships it builds in the real world as well as online. And to me, that's so exciting to see and be such a small part of. You've interviewed a lot of cool people. Is there like a dream client that you're like, man, I hope one day I can speak to this person?
Oh, a ton. And it's why I got into it, Like there's certain names that I've had like on my wall where I'm like, I got into this to interview these people, and the second I interview these people, everything's validated for me. I don't care if I make 6 figures, 7 figures. I don't care if I make 10 grand a year doing this. I don't care if I make $10 a year doing this. As long as I got those names, big pro wrestling fan. So Chris Jericho, professional wrestler. The whole reason I started a podcast to begin with, I'm like, because I wanted to get into broadcasting. I'm like, he's a wrestler. He's a frontman for a rock and roll band. He's a podcaster. He makes movies. He writes scripts. I'm like, the dude does like 10 different things. I'm like, I don't have to be just one thing. I could be multiple different things if I want to. As long as I'm willing to put in the work and like timing matches up, you make things happen. So he was like the guy that really got me into it. He's like one of my favorite pro wrestlers of all time. Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters is like my number one idol in the world. Just love the way the guy carries himself. Music rocks. Great story from where he came from, like playing in garage bands in Virginia, moving to Seattle, meeting Kurt Cobain and being the drummer for Nirvana. Then he has to audible because his lead singer died, and then starts his own stuff, which becomes one of the biggest rock bands of all time with the Foo Fighters. Like, it's just... And the dude knows how to tell a story. He does documentaries. He does movies. He's just like... He's a rock star, but he's a celebrity, too, and he's just a cool dude.
Did you watch the Foo Fighter movie?
Oh, Studio 666.
Yeah.
Great slasher film.
It
was really good. Because they're playing themselves. It's great.
Yeah, that was a good movie.
There was very few acting in that. Like the Whitney Cummings and Remy Jaffe death scene. Amazing. That was a great death scene. I remember they would do interview junkets with like Jimmy Kimmel, Jimmy Fallon. They're like, yeah, you guys made a slasher. Like, who had the best like killing scene? And they're all pointing at Rami like, yeah, he had the best killing scene. And then I saw the movie. I'm like, yeah, that was by far and away the best killing scene right there.
Yeah, that was a good movie. Sorry to interrupt you on that.
Yeah, Dave Grohl, Chris Jericho. I mentioned Michael Kay, voice of the New York Yankees. My whole reasoning for getting into broadcasting to begin with. That would be a full circle interview for sure. Howard Stern, Sirius XM just bought out the studio at the Wynn. So I'm sure he's going to be using that at some point. Would love to, at very least, shake that man's hand. There's just so many different people. My next phase, for anybody listening out there hiring, is like entertainment reporting is what I want to get into next. Beyond those junket interviews for like movie premieres, and I have like 100, 200, 300 people like just on the top of my head that I'd love to interview. And that's why I'm going to keep doing this forever, cuz like I just want to meet people, I want to tell stories. And everybody who's been in this has unbelievable stories. Like recently, a pro wrestling interviewer by the name of Chris Van Vliet, who I've had on the show, tremendous dude. Again, like great show, great host, even better person, right? Got to hang out and go to The Undertaker's house to do a 2-hour interview with him. And then The Undertaker had Chris Van Vliet on his podcast to do a 2-hour interview with him. Like, how cool is that? Like, you wouldn't have thought 15 years ago a kid in his mid-20s from Toronto, Canada, would get a chance to interview one of, if not the greatest professional wrestler of all time, who's notorious for not doing interviews at the time. The dude was in character his entire career, and now that he's retired, he's doing interviews, and he's kind of like showing people like behind the curtain stuff of who he actually is, behind the, like Mark Calloway's his real name, the character behind The Undertaker. And like, to be able to have full circle moments like that, that's why I live for this. It's like, the day I started my podcast, I want to have Chris Jericho on. The day I hopefully have Chris Jericho on, I could be like, this was all worth it. You know? And that's way more fun than sitting in an office and collecting a paycheck. Sometimes you have to do it. I might be in that position again to have to do that, you know? But I'm always going to be driven by what I'm doing, and I will always continue to work at it. I'll always continue to go through all the blurry moments. Like in this day and age, the podcast wave. When you say you're a podcaster, it's like, oh, okay, you live in your mom's basement. Gotcha. Good for you, buddy. You know, like it's literally like that. Sometimes it's like, oh, you're a podcast. Good for you. You know. Because it's like, oh, everybody's doing it, and you just get thrown into that cesspool of like creators that aren't gonna actually do it. Versus being like, no, I've been doing this for almost a decade. You know, I've interviewed some cool names.
Yeah, I feel that when you say that, because like it was the same thing with like doing photography or video. It's like, oh, you make videos? Cool. I'm like, yeah, like I have my own company, and like I've filmed for pretty big names. Like,
this is my studio. Look at all this stuff. Like, it looks great.
Yeah,
you know? It's not like you're just like one camera.
Yeah, like, but like they're like,
laptop.
oh, you make videos? Oh, that's cool. I'm like, yeah, we just shot with like eBay. Just shot for PayPal.
Yep.
Nordic Track. Like, yeah, we just make little cute videos. Yeah, okay.
It stinks, doesn't it? It's like, ugh, but it motivates you too. I almost use that motivation. I'm like, I'm just gonna work 10 times harder. You say like, clients don't want to post every day. You got to post like 5 times a day in this day and age to get your stuff out there. And it's got to be quality too. And I will go back to this multiple times throughout this interview. It's like, if you're willing to put in the work and this is genuinely something you want to do, it's going to be seamless. Like, I try to post 3, 4, 5 times a day, but it's seamless because I've been doing it for years. And I enjoy the process. I don't care if it gets 10 views, you know? I'll be lucky if it gets 100,000 views, like awesome. But it's like, even like those people that are seeing it are not like loyal followers of what you're doing. That post just blew up, you know? It might like give you a sense of pride being like, oh, this clip went viral, but I'd rather have 200 loyal people listen to it versus 100,000 people that are only going to see that clip, you know? Because you can have 50,000 followers, 100,000 followers, 500,000 followers, but 99% of those followers just follow you based on one clip that they liked, and your stuff's not actually showing up in their feed. Like, how many creators do you see in this day and age who have 1 million followers, but then they have like 13 likes on their post?
Yeah, it's crazy to me. And that's one thing, like, especially people starting out, I always try to remind them, like, numbers don't matter. They do for certain things, right? But especially as a business owner, like, they don't matter. You get 10 people in there that are potential customers to watch that clip and like it and want to watch more from you. That's 10 potential customers. Like, you know, or like just even creating content. Like, I get hyped, you know, we get like 200 views or whatever. I get like 3 comments. I'm like hyped because people are like, man, I love this. I'm like, cool.
Yep.
Like, I'm glad you like it because this put a lot of effort into this.
I would say, like, if I get very least 1 or 2 comments on a post or a video, I'm like, mission successful.
Yeah.
You know, someone engaged. Someone was paying attention. Someone was listening. Like, starting out doing this, it's like, okay, I was getting decent views, but like nobody was commenting, nobody was sharing. And I'm like, I feel like that's way more important. Like, for people that are like posting on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, wherever, focus on comments and shares. Don't care. I don't care about the likes. I don't care about the views. Anybody could buy those these days.
Yeah.
People do buy those these days. Focus on the genuine interactions that you're getting from people that are engaging with your content and putting it out there. Because the more people that put it out there, the more people that, you know, the likes and the views will eventually catch up.
I was talking about something similar the other day with a friend who's a filmer in town, and she's always posting about, like, you know, her clients are tagging her, sharing her, you know, posting about her. And I was like, man, that must be nice. I was like, I mean, I've done this for 18 years. My clients barely even mention me. You know, I was like, I don't know what it's like for a client to be like, hey, good work, you know? And we were talking about it, though, and I was like, you know, I mean, I'm not too bummed because I'm very happy with where my business is. And she's like, yeah, well, you make like 10 times more than I make. My clients just share me, but they barely pay me, you know? And I'm like, yeah, I think I'd rather be paid and make money than get shared on social media.
Right. Like, exposure is a good thing, but if it's not converting, then it's just it's exposure with no weight to it.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat with you, too. Like, sometimes I see, like, people who I feel like don't put in half, you know, the effort to make it look great. All of their friends repost it and be like, oh, this is awesome. They're so courageous, whatever. I'm like, my friends don't do that for me, but I don't expect them to do it for me either. It's like they'll send me a text being like, oh, dude, that was great. You know, I don't need them to, like, repost and, like, then I have, like, 18 different stories of the exact same picture, you know, because all my friends were like, oh, he's great, whatever. And you see that, but it's like, I'd rather make the dough than
and it's like, it can be like a little disheartening when you're not getting those accolades and shares and stuff. Like, at least for me, I know, like, when I see other people get it, I'm like, oh, it'd be nice if my clients would. Now, I'll say this: in the podcast studio, our clients are amazing. They're always tagging us. They're always sharing stuff and putting us in there. You know, they come here, they take photos, they tag us. Some of them try to like invite us as collaborators on every single thing they post. I'm like, okay, I can't have my entire feed be you. So, but thank you. And so, like, it's been interesting for me going from like the production side to the podcast side of production, and get those more shares and get those more comments and stuff, because our clients are just more social already.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to kind of go from that to this. Or like I'll go post on like my Canico Media page. The only people that ever comment or do anything are just other filmers. Like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But then I meet people in real life and they're like, dude, I've been following you for years. Love the work. Our business is finally ready. You know, our budget's this much. Like, can you come help us? We want your style. And I'm like, cool. Mm-hmm. It just would have been nice for those years. You would have been like, at least click like, you know?
Yep.
So it can get disheartening, but it's like, you can't let the views dictate how well you're doing. You can't let those impressions kind of like...
at your core, you're not doing it for the right reasons if you're focused on that stuff. Again, I will do this for 5 views and whatever, you know? Pay me in drumsticks. I don't care, you know?
Yeah.
I'll do this. Like, I think Matt Damon did an interview talking about Goodwill Hunting one time because they sold that for $650,000. And they split it $325 each for Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. But he did an interview saying, I would have sold it for a piece of chicken. And he's like, I didn't know what this was worth. You know, I just loved the process of filmmaking and doing this. And you never really know when that big client's going to come. You don't know when that big break is going to come. He was saying that he and Ben Affleck both auditioned for Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams, which eventually Ethan Hawke was casted for that role. Ethan Hawke got the role, and Matt Damon was saying, I went from auditioning and being one of the 3 finalists for Dead Poets Society to being the guy who was at the ticket booth selling tickets for people at a movie theater going in to go see Dead Poets Society. Just to tell you, like, the range of different jobs and occupations there are in the entertainment space, right? You can go from, like, having your dream role to having to watch someone else do your dream role and being the guy doing, like, the most meaningless job and, you know, a job that's probably not fulfilling for an entire summer. So it's like you need to have the expectation that, like, no one's going to care until you make them care. Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, big pro wrestling fan. He had a show called Young Rock for a few years there. And there was a scene where he was talking to Ron Simmons, who's a WWE Hall of Famer, saying, like, man, and this was when he was, like, first trying to, like, get over with the crowd, and they're all booing him, and it's just like, it's just not working, right? He's like, nobody really gives a damn. Like, he's like, when I'm a good guy, nobody gives a damn. When I'm a bad guy, nobody gives a damn. And Ron Simmons looked him dead in the eye and was like, people aren't going to give a damn, Dwayne, until you make them give a damn. So make people give a damn by genuinely being your true self as a creator, as a content creator, as an interviewer, as a podcaster, as a broadcaster, as a TV host, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as a client, a guy who's supposed to be a client. You just want to be able to serve people at the end of the day. If you're not serving anybody, nobody cares about what you're doing, because if it's not serving people and it's not providing value for people, nobody's going to be attracted to it.
I love it, man. Well,
attract, don't chase. Yeah. That's valuable life advice for anything, business, relationships, whatever.
I love it, man. Well, where can people find your show and learn more about you?
You can follow me at Jack O'Hara TV on both Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, you name it, and then at Jack O'Hara TV on YouTube. Comment, like, and subscribe, please. We need it. We need new subscribers every single day to make this dream work. So, and I'm very grateful for everybody that's been along for the ride, because, like I said, not everybody gets an opportunity on a Monday morning to be here in a podcast studio to talk about their dreams. So,
thanks for coming out.